Hi, I'm John Hayes. I'm a bankruptcy lawyer in California, and I've been teaching at the University of West Los Angeles School of Law for 30 years now. This is part 3 of the little series I've been doing about exemptions. How do exemptions work in bankruptcy? And it's unfortunately very complicated. Don't file bankruptcy based on what I'm telling you. Get a lawyer. But it's designed for my students and lawyers just getting into bankruptcy. So what I want to talk about is the California exemptions. I mentioned in the previous 2 videos that California has opted out. Congress said states can opt out if they want. In other words, states can say, you must use our exemptions, even if you're in bankruptcy court. I believe about half of the states in the United States have opted out. So California's opted out. So where are the exemptions then? They're in the California Code of Civil Procedure. Some are in sections 703. There's a lot of 703 sections, or in 704, CCP 704. There's a lot of 704 exemptions also. I want to mention, just to make sure I don't forget, that this opt-out means that the exemptions that are in the bankruptcy code in section 522D, there's a bunch of exemptions. When the state opts out, they opt out of section 522D. There are other exemptions. There's a few other exemptions in section 522 that still apply to everybody, whether the state is opted out or not. And those are IRAs and retirement accounts and maybe 1 or 2 other things. So I'll get to those in a future video. But so the exemptions in California are in section 703 or section 704. So that's the whole point of this video, is that word or. There's a list in section 703, CCP 703.140B as in boy. It's one of the few code sections in the whole world of law that I know down to the, like 703.140B is a list of exemptions that somebody is filing in California. Most people, almost all people who are filing in California can use the exemptions in 703.140B. There's also a bunch of exemptions in sections 704. What California law says, first of all, is you can use the exemptions in 703.140B or the exemptions in 704. You can't pick and choose between the 2 lists. All right, so how do you know? Well, you just have to take a look at them all and see which list fits you the best. But I'll tell you this. The list in section 703.140B is very similar to the list in section 522D of the bankruptcy code. Why California did that, it's beyond me. But they said, oh, you can't use the exemptions in section 522D of the bankruptcy code, but you can use exemptions in section 703.140B of the Code of Civil Procedure, and they're really close. The exemptions in section 704 are much more expansive. There's a lot more of them. And by the way, those apply. The exemptions in Section 704 apply whether you're in bankruptcy or not. Section 703.140B applies only if you're in bankruptcy. All right. How do you know? How do we figure out? Well, there's this thing called the wildcard exemption. So the wildcard exemption is in Section 703.140B. By the way, bankruptcy lawyers call that the federal list, even though it's in the California Code of Civil Procedure. Because it's so close to what's in the bankruptcy code, we call it the federal list. The exemptions in Section 704 we call the state list. All right. So in Section 703.140B, there's a wild card. And the wild card says you can exempt anything you want up to $30,000 in value. All right. So there's a lot of other exemptions in 703.140B. So let's say household furniture. Household furniture is basically exempt anyway. So if your household furniture and clothing and books and dishes and all that stuff, food in the refrigerator, it's all exempt anyway, as long as there's no particular high value. So you don't have to use the wild card to protect that. That's exempt anyway. Now, what if you had a $1,000 piece of furniture? If the trustee came along and said, well, I'm gonna, that's more than unusual value. If you're using the federal list, the 703 list, you could take some of the wild card and apply it to that particular item that the trustee is trying to take. What about the state list, the 704s? The state list is where the homestead exemption is. In California, the homestead exemption is a minimum of $300,000 with a high of $600,000, depending on which county you live in. All right. So the difference between the two lists is really the wild card and the homestead exemption. If you need to exempt your home at this healthy amount, $300,000 to $600,000, then you can't use the wild card because you have to use the state list. There's no wild card in the state list. All right, so when people call, they want to talk about their creditors and their difficulties, and I want to know, do you own a house? And do you own a house that has equity? If they say, well, I own a house that's worth $500,000, how much do you owe on it? $600. Well, there's nothing to exempt. The trustee can't sell the house if it's underwater like that. But if the house is worth $500,000 and you owe $300, now there's $200,000 of equity. You can exempt the $200,000 of equity under the state list, Section 704. But now you can't use the wild card because you can't use the federal list, which is in Section 703.140B. So what I think I'll end this with two additional points. Point one is you really have to look at these exemptions carefully. Most exemptions do not say an asset is exempt. What it says is some amount of value in the asset is exempt. So there's no exemption for the car. And the exemption especially has nothing to do with whether you need it to go to work or not. The exemption is some value in the car. And the value that we look at is equity. So as I was saying, if the car is worth $15,000 and I owe 10, there's only 5,000 of equity. I can exempt I have to look at the two lists, but I can exempt that equity of $5,000. I'm not exempting a $15,000 car. I'm exempting some equity in the car. The point to that is that if there's no equity, then I don't have to worry about exemption. The trustee can't sell it anyway, all right? So I have my list here. I was just going to point out a couple of, I have my list of the 703.140B. So let's start with cars. Under section 703.140B, the exemption on a motor vehicle is $5,850. Again, this is the spring of 2021. These numbers change, seems to me like fairly regularly. I'm constantly wondering if I'm looking at the most current number, but under the federal list, which is where the wild card is, the car is exempt up to $5,850. Under the state list, the car is exempt up to $3,320. That's CCP 704.010. So if I can use the federal list, which I can if I don't have a house, if I don't have to worry about my house, and I have a car worth $30,000, and there's no loans against the car. So I would exempt the car $5,850 because it's a car, and then I would use the difference between $30,000 and $5,850, which is what that's $24,150. So I can take that amount of the wild card and exempt my whole car. $5,850 because it's a car, and 24 something because I'm using the wild card. Then that would leave me about $6,000 worth of wild card to use on something else. All right, there's a couple others that come up fairly regularly. One is jewelry. Under the federal list, 703, jewelry is exempt up to $1,750. Under the state list, jewelry is exempt up to $8,725. Why California did this, I don't have a clue. What about tools of the trade? The tools of the trade under the state list are exempt up to $8,725. Under the, what am I looking at here? The tools of the trade are the same under either list, $8,725. Under the state list, which is 704.060, if a husband and wife file together and they both have their own tools, they can each get $8,725. Under this federal list, the 703 list, there's only one exemption for tools of the trade, which is $8,725. If both spouses had $8,725 worth of worth of tools of the trade, and they're using the federal list, they would have to use $8,725 because it's tools, and then they would use some of the wild card to protect the rest of it. Now, what if they're already using some of the wild card on the car and they don't have enough left? That's why this, that's why, you know, I'm constantly looking up exemptions when I talk to people who are interested in filing bankruptcy. You know, we have to make sure that there isn't something that the trustee is going to try to take. So to do that, we have to figure out what you own first, what your legal and equitable interests are in property. Then we have to figure out whether we can exempt it or not. And when we're figuring out whether we can exempt it, we have to look very carefully at exactly what the code says. All right, so I'm going to talk about the homestead exemption separately. And so that will be part 3 of exemptions. There's more to come. If you like this video, click like. YouTube likes it when people like the videos. So if you have any questions, I'm John Hayes. My firm is Resnick Hayes Maradi. Our office, we have offices in Encino and downtown Los Angeles. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section on YouTube, and I'll try to give it an answer. So thanks a lot. Bye-bye.